Yeah, hopefully everybody can hear me clearly. And thanks to Sparks Plus for the opportunity to speak at and present at the Australian Equities Day. Volt's got a really great story. I think we're doing really good things right throughout the whole battery minerals supply chain. So I guess I would add on to the mines and the development of those, the downstream processing activities that we've got underway as well. And that's where we see significant value for Volt in the longer run as we work through and build out our plans in the production materials for lithium-ion batteries, and also byproduct materials for other battery technologies. So I'll just get through to the initial sort of highlights page. So multi-commodity battery minerals focused business. So quite apart from the graphite assets that we have, we also have some lithium license applications in Serbia. We're just waiting on those applications to be approved so we can then move forward to an exploration program there. That process is a little bit held up following an election in Serbia. It takes 3 to 6 months for the government to settle down and pretty much move forward with these sort of approval processes there. But yeah, we obviously have some key assets in Ukraine, where we'll talk about the restart of that operation soon. And also our Bunyu project development in East Africa and Tanzania. And also in Europe and the US, our processes that we have underway in terms of downstream graphite production. So, we have assets right through, Africa, in Europe, and developing IP and assets in also the US. We have these byproducts that we will make from our battery anode production or planned production facilities that are basically coating style products that can be used in alkaline batteries and lead acid batteries to lower costs and improve performance. And we have some test work underway and agreements with counterparties there that provide the opportunity to pretty much get high value revenue for every tonne of graphite that we feed into these processing facilities. Working on our ESG policy and principles at the moment. So we'll announce something in the near term around our Volt corporate policy covering the whole group and how we will cascade this through the whole business. So ESG is an important component when we start talking to some of the end users as well, where we're talking to car manufacturers and cell manufacturers, and they're, a key part of their decision-making process. And when they're looking at their business is, the lowering of carbon throughout the whole production and supply chain, and more broadly, management of environmental, social investment programs, and of course, governance. So that's a key part of what we're looking to integrate into our business and become probably a little bit more transparent about what we're doing in that area as well, which we think is a key part of our business plans going forward, and will help us in terms of completing agreements and offtakes with various groups that we're currently in discussion with. Very experienced management team as well. I have a lot of project development experience, financing and into operations, and you'll see later on our team that we're expanding at the moment across the different activities that we've got underway. Market cap of 56 million, which is, very, I think, just listening to the last Brookside Energy presentation, I think, that we classify ourselves in the same position, that we see ourselves as pretty significantly undervalued relative to our peers and relative to our assets. I think, we see prices moving of companies that have no production, related to improvements in graphite pricing, over recent times. And we actually have a producing mine, or will have a producing mine in Ukraine, and be a direct beneficiary of those higher prices through the production and sales that they'll be achieving in the very, very short term. So here's our board and senior management. You can see that we've built our team out, with Justine joining us last year as COO, and the two Michaels as well, heading up our BD activities and our processes in the US and Europe in terms of our downstream processing activities. And so, we've got a lot of activity. I mean, the bigger picture for us is this integrated supply chain approach. So being able to produce graphite from whether it's in the Ukraine and in the in the midterm out of Tanzania as well, and delivering that graphite, some of it, earmarked potentially for China, but dominantly we see, the Ukraine being a supplier into Europe and potentially material into the US in the shorter or nearer term. And from Tanzania, graphite products being delivered into US and Europe, again for downstream, with a coarser material, bearing in mind downstream production or supply is mainly about fine material for processing into battery anode and other materials that we see there. The coarser flake market is still very much driven by things like flame retardant materials and foil markets, which are growing a lot slower. So, all the interest in the market is very much around the finer material and the supply of that, which is looking very short. And you can see the cell making sort of forecast by the end of this decade. While China will remain pretty dominant, Europe and the US will become pretty significant players. When you look at those percentages, you're talking about graphite supply into, say, the US having to be around 650 to 700,000 tonnes per annum. And in Europe, something like about 1.5 million tonnes per annum for natural flake graphite. Now, this is, based around nearly 6 million tonnes annually of flake graphite being required by 2030. And, you look at current levels of production, which are less than 1 million tonnes per annum, around about 850 to 900,000. So we've got to see pretty significant expansion. And, on the right-hand side there, we're a member of the European Battery Alliance, the European Raw Materials Alliance. We're involved in those networks, also engaged with EIT. These are all organisations sponsored by the European Commission, and the EU, and all about developing, supply chains, particularly in Europe, and with assets in Ukraine, and then in, the potential lithium projects in Serbia, provide us with a really strong footprint into those sort of key markets. We mentioned about 2030. This is UBS's estimate, from last year, but I think, the numbers still hold up. So you can see natural graphite, which has got a much higher production base than where lithium was started with. So in terms of tonnages, natural graphite demand is going to grow significantly, up to about 6 million tonnes per annum, by 2030. As I said, current production, or last year, was probably around 850 to 900,000 tonnes. So that's where you're getting about a 7 times growth factor required. Obviously, lithium is the other key component, and we will have exposure to both those key battery minerals going forward. Outlook for battery anode material. This is the darker shaded sort of smaller parts of these individual bars of a number of cell makers show you what's planned to come over the course of this decade in terms of, capacity expansion and cell making. Of course, what that's driving is, real significant demand for battery anode materials. So, it's one thing to be a graphite miner and processor, but if you're really going to be a part of this new energy and the electrification of everything, you've got to be dealing directly with the cell makers and the car makers in terms of your product. And that's where we're positioning Volt to be, and to be a significant player in the downstream, based around an integrated supply chain approach, as I mentioned earlier on. So we've in terms of our downstream processing, we've adopted this inverted flow sheet, which is an infographic sort of down the bottom there, which shows the different processing steps from the mines, in Europe and Africa being the feedstock, and then the next 4 to 5 steps are basically what you'll do at a single facility. So from thermal purification to micronization and spheronization, we've been achieving about 74% yields on spheronization, which means you've got non-spherical material being separated out roughly at around that 25, 26%. For us, that's then converted into what we call an ultra high purity graphite or UHPG product, which is then transformed into a coatings which are used in the alkaline and lead acid battery business. So creating a high value product there. And then obviously the 74% spherical yield will go into anode production for lithium ion batteries in electrification or EVs or energy storage or those sort of end user applications. So this is been a key sort of body of work for us to get this flow sheet design. There's equipment selection, and we're at the point where we will commence feasibility studies into the development of initial sort of production scale facility. Prior to that, we're looking at building out a small scale production facility, really just get us into making hundreds of kilos or some low tonnages in the near term, so we can continue on with our sort of provision of products to the cell makers and other groups that we're in discussions with in the US and in Europe. So pretty unique business from the point of view of the multi-commodity aspect of it, but this is where we've been building out our battery materials, particularly the end, the downstream production. So we have a technical partnership with AETC. We have our DFSs that we're going to get underway soon, and we'll make some announcements around that, and the engineering group that we've been working with to date. Lithium-ion battery gigafactories. We've already announced our arrangements with energy supply developers. They're a little bit held up with their cell maker announcement, but that will, resolve itself soon, and I think people will be pretty happy with the group that's going there. Some more news flow on that, albeit that it's been, sort of running a bit slowly in that area. Unfortunately, can't control the timing and what third parties, are planning to do in their activities. So we have to fit in with, the timeframes of most of the groups and when they're prepared to move forward and make announcements. Urban Electric Power, we have an agreement, a joint development agreement there that's going to move through to an offtake. That test work's still underway. We're in a second round process with them. And there'll be more news flow around that as we move forward. Same with the lead acid battery technology and the expander sort of coatings that we've developed with them with Apollo Energy Systems. We own the IP for both of these products, and we'll be able to expand discussions with end users other potential customers once we complete these sort of test work programs and sort of sign them off and move forward. In the lithium-ion battery, CSBG or battery anode material sector, we've mentioned ESB, but we have a second group that is not too far away from going public. We're in a second round process with them in terms of developing battery anode material to meet their specific requirements. So it's not like you can just churn out material, battery anode material, and it's just being sold, like in the retail environment or something like that. Each group will have their own specific requirements that could go to particle size and density and various other sort of factors as well, coating technologies. So these are more complex processes and help us, meet these sort of requirements and demands from end users and be able to move forward in this space. Just a little bit on Zadaleski. We're looking to get that now. We've announced that we're going to restart, so we've set the date following some further work and just fine tuning around logistics and sales contracts for the start date of Monday, the 1st of August. So we'll make an announcement on that date with more information around what we're planning to do with that business, and a bit of information about what we're seeing in graphite pricing in Europe too, which is pretty strong and positive. So that will be a good, outcome for us in what's been a pretty difficult period in recent times. But we're confident that, the environment around where the mine is and the processing plant, now logistics chains, which will basically head north along the western side of Ukraine and out into Poland, and then distribution into the broader Europe from there. So we think, the business is safe. There's been no military activity at all for easily a radius of a couple of 100 kilometres around the mine and processing facilities. There's no targets nearby, and we just think that, for the benefit of the community and even the Ukrainian economy, while they're in a pretty difficult situation, the restarting of the business and getting us back into graphite production, and being able to then use that production to help with our discussions with downstream, customers in the battery market is a key benefit and positive step forward for us and for the Ukrainian community generally. Bunyoo graphite, everybody always pays a lot of focus on that, rightly so. This is where we started from, but I'd like to think that Vault's much bigger than just the Bunyoo project now, with our Ukraine business and the very real sort of tangible activities we've got underway downstream. And when people start to see the news flow that will come from that, and we've already had some agreements and some announcements around that, but there'll be more to come on that front. But nevertheless, we are trying to put in place the final sort of steps to get to a construction start at Bunyoo. So we're pivoting. We've already had binding offtake agreements some years ago with Chinese offtakers. What we're finding is with the banks and financiers we're dealing with now, they want to see, more transparent offtakes with either Westernized or East Asia groups. By that I mean, South Korea or Japan. But so we're currently in that process. We've announced one agreement that's moving, LOI, that's moving to a definitive offtake agreement. That's still in progress. GraphX is listing on the New York Stock Exchange. So, they've got a number of things on their plate as part of that. So sort of cutting them a little bit of slack in terms of getting this offtake agreement finalised, but it will get done. Further offtake negotiations pretty advanced, particularly with a group in Europe. So we'll make some further announcements on that. That will be for the balance of the available materials. So that'll complete the offtakes. And then we'll move through to, hopefully finalising our development funding discussions with some of the financiers that we've been dealing with, both over the longer term and some more recently, or one in particular more recently. So total, funding target of about 40 million, but about, the debt side of it will probably be about 70% of that. And then we've got a potential project level equity participant for the balance to fully fund that development cost. Big project, two-stage development, and eventually, while we had a PFS that looked at about 170,000 tonnes, we think eventually Bunyoo could become a 200,000 tonne per annum producer once it gets through its initial sort of development phase. So by the mid 2000s, a couple of 100,000 tonnes here, and Zavaleski's got a big resource base too, not JORC, but we see opportunities to develop that plant to potentially up to 100,000 tonnes per annum, and that would still give each project multi-decade life. So you can be a significant player in this, and of course we would allocate a lot of that graphite into our downstream processing businesses, which have significant sort of value add opportunities. And I guess this slide, a little bit mindful of time, but if you look at this slide and just look along the right hand side, so these are the three sort of general processing steps to get to saleable products. So obviously the graphite concentrates, I would suggest those range of prices of $600 to $1,200 are probably in Europe in particular are probably at least a couple of $100 too low at the moment. So, we would expect those numbers to move up. And in fact, we'll make some announcements, like I said, around that early next week when we restart Ukraine business. Graphite concentrate in through to an uncoated battery anode material can get you pricing of somewhere around that sort of mid to high threes US dollars a ton. And then for the coating step, which is got a bit of technology about it, uses a bit of energy as well, generally heated to around about 1300 degrees Celsius for coating, pretty much bakes the carbon coating onto the particle. You can be achieving around 8,000 US dollars a ton. Cost of all that, probably less than US 4,000. So you can see the opportunity around plants that, in the downstream area could be making margins of around, over 4,000 US dollars a ton. We put out in the past, you look at the facility like ESD is looking at developing at 50 gigawatts, will need about 60,000 tonnes of battery anode material. So you can see that you're talking pretty significant revenues, pretty significant earnings. When you eventually move to valuations that are more price earnings driven, manufacturing, you'd be expecting to get multiples up around about, mid-teens or something like that. So on a price earnings basis. So these are high value opportunities for Volt, not only with ESD. Like I said, there's a second group in the US that we're moving forward with that'll go public soon. And we've also had some very good discussions in Europe with, cell makers there and our opportunities there. So this integrated strategy, provides pretty good returns at the mine level, but even bigger returns on the downstream side, and positions you to be engaged directly into the whole electrification story. With end users being, the cell makers and the car manufacturers. So that's pretty much the story. So I might just stop sharing the screen.